really hope you enjoy this episode. So, if you're watching on YouTube, if you could please like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, or if you're listening on Spotify, you can always follow us there. Every like and share and subscribe can help our channel to be seen by many more Stargate fans. So, we really appreciate it. And then we also have all of our socials listed up on the screen right now if you wish to follow us there. Okay, thank you, and I hope you enjoy. Bye.
As we near the end of this season of our Stargate Fandom podcast, which is our first season, I thought it would be interesting to explore something that they explored at the first season of SG-1, which was this opening of alternative realities, parallel universe, also with some time travel and other things involved. Because on the one hand, it's such a science fiction cliche to do these kinds of things. I also think Stargate, I mean, in my opinion, there's some ways they do it that's rather interesting, and because they have their sort of Stargate humor and little Stargate things in there, I think a lot of the things are actually kind of clever and interesting. I also know it's very hotly contested, and some people can't stand the time travel or alternate reality or dream episodes. And so I thought it'd be interesting to talk about, I mean, first our opinion on these kinds of things and also how we feel they play into the plot. And I also think how Stargate uses these episodes to explore some of the more fan service aspects, especially like ships, without actually putting the ships in the show, which I think is something that would have broken the show. So I don't know, maybe you want to say, what are your thoughts on parallel universe episodes? Do you like them?
Yeah, yeah. I do actually like them. Like, I think, like, s specifically to Stargate with how they do them, I can't say I've loved every single one that they've done, probably. Like, if I think back about all the different ones that they've done, there's certainly probably ones I've liked better than others. But I do really like it because I think it kind of gives you a break a little from sometimes, like, if something's, like, really, like, and I mean, sometimes they're intense episodes, they're not, like, all, like, sunshine and roses, but, like, um but, it's like I feel like it gives a break from maybe a brief break at times from, like, maybe where the episodes are kind of heading, and like you said, it does bring in elements of, like, an alternate version of those characters, so it's kind of like when certain things happen between characters that you want to see happen, you're like, "Woohoo," or like you get to see sides of those characters that could have been that are kind of interesting takes on that, I think, that sometimes you don't like so much, or surprising, and it just kind of I think it gives variety to, like, what we're watching, and yeah, I think overall I do like it. Um yeah, like I said, some more than others, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess for example, I think a lot of people, I mean, maybe I'm wrong because I've only ever heard people complain about like Mobius, the time travel episode at the end of season 8, but I actually really enjoyed it. And one of the reasons that I enjoyed it is because of the alternate version of Carter and Daniel that were in that episode. Because, I mean, for anyone not familiar with the Mobius episode or needs a refresher, they went back to ancient Egypt to get a ZPM, which um, I mean, I think that there's also some plot relevance, but I really think they mostly made, I mean, this episode was partially like a lot of fan service. And um, I thought it was interesting because not only because they messed up the timeline, you get different versions of Carter and Daniel that are existing, and their their lives did not play out at all how they did in the original SG-1, and they're super like they're kind of nerdy and they both play these parts really well. And they also even make a reference to one of the cringiest lines from the pilot episode that was later deleted, and I thought that was kind of clever.
Oh my
So
gosh,
actually,
yeah.
those kind of things I really like, and I like the fact that I'm sure the show knows it's very self-aware of the fact that this kind of things are cliche in science fiction, is sort of time travel and things, but they kind of like look at themselves when they do those kind of things.
Oh
So,
yeah, yeah. And that's why it works, I think. I think it
mhm.
works because because I think a lot of Stargate just in general is them taking things and kind of almost making fun of themselves, or if they have something that initially, like you says that line that she says in the very beginning, I can never remember it, so I won't try and attempt to repeat it, but the reproductive organs thing.
Just because my reproductive organs are on the inside.
Yeah, and I think, like, it's like probably when they first had her say that, they weren't thinking of it as a funny thing. They were thinking of it as like this like feminist statement that really didn't quite land in that way. And so it's kind of funny then they can and who they are, I don't know, like all the whoever makes all these decisions, right? But like that they can do that because I think they also continue to poke fun at that line in other episodes too. Like I think
Hmm.
I think there's a few episodes where they do that. And it's so yeah, that's funny and I love the nerdy Sam in particular. Like it's just really funny just how she carries herself and how, like, she moves her mouth when she talks, like, she just always acts like she smells something bad is her expression.
No, it's very true. It's very true.
And I mean, like, part of me was just like, I loved that version of Sam, but then part of me was just like, that so would not happen, regardless of like if like things didn't work out, she wouldn't suddenly just turn into a whole other person like that. But like, I can see like where they were going with it, and I did enjoy it. But like, then there was like the skeptical part of me that's like, well, this doesn't really make sense.
Yeah, would she really have been that underachieving? Yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah,
Because I think Daniel probably would have ended up in this. I mean, this is a very realistic position when you think about for Daniel, considering he was an academic, he was proposing theories that were way out there that the academic community didn't accept. The fact that he would not be working as a professor at a university is very likely.
yeah,
So, or that, he's probably like working, teaching one class, and then he has to teach other things on the side. And so I think for sure, like his situation, I think you're right. Probably if you really stop and think about it, Carter's situation is not realistic because she was always an overachiever. Her dad was in the military. She would have likely got involved in the military in some way, or at least in some kind of like uh, astrophysics in some capacity, like NASA or something. I think if she wouldn't have gone into the Stargate program, she probably would have went into NASA.
yeah,
So, so in that
yeah.
sense, yeah, you're right. Although I did love like I loved Nerdy Carter, and I
Oh
thought
my gosh, yeah.
I think sometimes those kind of episodes probably give the actors a chance to do something. I mean, in a way, you're always playing the same character, but playing different versions of the same character must be on the one hand really difficult, but also really fun, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that'd be amazing. Like, if I was an actress, like, I would have loved playing that role of the nerdy Carter, Like, I think that just seems like, because also, if I remember correctly, Amanda Tapping was saying how she started off in comedy.
Hmm.
She just kind of, in a weird sense, has been known for all these sci-fi roles, but, I think didn't she used to do like a comedy club thing and or something like that. Like she that was like her thing. So like it's nice to like I would love to actually see her as an actress be in more things that are quite funny because you can just tell.
Totally.
You can just tell like she's got some good humor and that she'd be great. So I would like love to see her in
Definitely.
like a
Yeah.
really funny role. Um but yeah, I really did like the nerdy Carter. And I did like how they had Daniel, and if I remember correctly with that as well, wasn't that the same one that near the end they had Carter and Jack making out in that uh what do you
Hmm.
call it? Puddle jumper thing. I don't know if it
Yes,
was called a
exactly.
puddle jumper then, but like
Well, we all call them puddle jumpers now, so.
yeah. Yeah. And so that was funny because then that also because that was the nerdy Carter, right? It
Hmm.
was it was both the different the versions of each other, yeah. So, like, or was it? I'm getting confused now. Was that
I
the
think it
nerdy
was,
Carter?
I think
Yeah.
it was Nerdy Carter that was making out with O'Neill. the other
Yeah.
O'Neill or something.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's like funny because it's like everyone's always like shipping them together and so like it's
Yeah,
like you kind of get that without getting that. Because like you said, if it fully happened, it probably would have not played out
ruined the
as
show.
well as yeah. Which is weird with things like that, but I find that with shows that sometimes when you have characters that you really want together, if it's not that kind of show, like, and here it's a sci-fi show or whatever, it's like it's with the anticipation of it possibly happening, but then once it actually happens, sometimes the storylines can get quite boring. Or like, and then eventually they have something awful happen where then they break up and
Yeah.
so
I mean, I think most shows actually I found, even ones where like maybe that is a part of it, that there's some kind of, I found when the characters get together that you want to get together, it always ends up going downhill. Like at first you're really excited and then
yeah.
it usually like it can only happen at the end. But what's interesting with that is that I think I am not sure, but maybe the first time that they really hinted at this was in an alternate reality episode because I don't know if you like I remember the first thing way they introduced it was with the quantum mirror at the end of season one.
Mhm.
If SG-1 where Daniel went, and this was a very more so plot relevant thing because it became that he learned of the school world attack, and then when he went back, it became an important plot device because they were trying to shut the Stargate down, and Daniel said, no, 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 in this parallel reality, the Goa'uld are attacking, and I think it's going to happen here, and we need to stop it. And so it kind of became the thing that drove, alongside the pressure from the government, it drove the finale, which where they kind of escaped on their own and stopped Apophis. Um, but the second time that there was a Quantum Mirror episode, if I remember right, it was the one called Point of View where Carter came through, right? And it was long-haired Carter.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then and then I think if I remember right, she needed help. But in that episode, like wasn't her O'Neill killed and they were actually together. So that was
Yeah.
like the first time they maybe referenced. I can't remember if that was the first time they really referenced that overtly or not, but it might have been.
I think so because her hair was longer, right? Because she never became like she wasn't involved in the military, right?
Hmm.
And then she was mentioning how it was weird to see him because she had just lost him and they had been married, I think. I think they'd been married. Um yeah, I think that is the first time that they kind of insinuate that. Because I do remember her having longer hair, and I do remember everyone kind of being surprised that that was, like,
The
mentioned.
case.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I
Um,
think that was also the first time that they kissed, right? Because didn't she kiss him when she was leaving while Carter, like the real, like our Carter, was watching?
oh my gosh. Did they? Yeah, I think you're right.
And so it's like I kind of love that that was a way to just give a little bit of fan service, but not actually like thankfully it didn't like get realized.
Yeah,
And but it also made you go, ah, like
yeah.
but I mean on the other hand, like I don't know how to feel for like the Carter of our universe because that must be like super awkward.
That would be. Like, because I don't think it was I mean, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I don't think it was till after that was kind of insinuated that that's how it was. Well, not insinuated that I actually was how it was in the alternate like reality or whatever. But like, um, I don't think Carter ever really seemed like she had an interest in Jack in that way up to that point yet. So I think like their characters were very like
Hmm.
surprised to see that. They're just like, "What? Like that makes no sense." Like, because I don't think either one of them seemed to show in that reality like any sort of interest towards each other that was like shown to the viewer, right? If I can remember correctly. So I think it wasn't until after that that it's almost like it kind of got in their heads. Then they're just like, oh, I'm supposed to like this person.
That's a good point. I never thought about that, but I think you're right. I mean,
Yeah.
especially because like so. I mean, obviously the team all kind of, especially as they go on, they kind of have this like really strong bond and care for each other. But it's also, I mean, it's hard to say that's a romantic thing. It can also be because they're literally saving the world together and almost
Yeah,
dying. And,
yeah,
not every bond is like that. So I don't know, maybe you're right. And then it's like it also put it in the viewers' heads too. But
yeah.
I mean, I'd be really curious if somebody watching that, if they had thought of that before that episode, because I watched it all out of order. So,
I'm trying to remember when I very first watched it. And if I can remember correctly, like not the second time when I've watched it, but the first time when I watched it that I did, and I watched it in order. I don't think I expected that. I remember if I'm remembering correctly, I think I thought that was kind of weird. Like I never initially thought of the two of
interesting.
them. Um, and then the show kind of pushes it, that idea, like as a, after that fact. So it was for me, if I'm remembering correctly, I think it was a bit of a surprise. And then that got me thinking like, "Oh, okay, like, I guess I could see that," like, and
Hmm.
so it kinda seems like it did the same thing with the characters too, like, within the show, like, it was almost like they're like, "Oh, okay, I guess I can see that." Like, cause can you imagine, like, think of any real life situation, maybe somewhere where you're working or something and or like a good friend or whatever, right? And then all of a sudden, like you see an alternate reality where you're like married to that person and you're just like, what?
Yeah, you're right. It would really mess with your head. It would really mess with you. Yeah,
So it would be really strange. And then it probably would make you think, like, oh, maybe I'm misinterpreting this, Like,
that's such a good point. And I mean, in a way, it's also an easy way for the writers to kind of explore that idea and see how people react to it, to see if like everyone goes,
yeah,
oh, without really committing. Because
yeah,
then I guess in season 4, which would have been after that, they really had a lot of like uh Sam and Jack flavored episodes with the whole lead up to that Zaytark detector episode. So that's really
yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because there was that one, excuse me, there was that one episode, and I can't remember what it was called. I don't know if we have it written down or not, because technically it wasn't an alternate reality. It
Hmm.
was the one where, oh my God, my voice is going on. Sorry. Oh my God, sorry if I'm like coughing in the microphone. Um, it was the episode where they worked in that place where they constantly had to fix things, like they couldn't remember who they were and they were working in like a
Yeah.
factory. Like there was moments between Sam and Jack there, um, because they could remember each other but not fully remember each other.
Hmm.
And I can't remember what that episode was called. Um,
I can't remember. I know it's in season 4, and it's funny because I almost wrote that one down because I was thinking like that is kind of in a way it is an alternate reality and it's alternate versions of them, all of
yeah,
them. And I think when we were a minute ago talking about like the Sam and Daniel character in season 8 and how they turned out and how certain things like come through no matter what. I was thinking about that particular episode because I was thinking their minds were totally like they had this memory stamp, but Carter for sure, there were still a lot of Carterisms. Like she
do
came
you,
out with all these ideas.
do you know what that episode was called? Oh, you said it was from
Um,
season 4?
yeah, on Beneath the Surface, maybe.
Yep, that's it. So season 4, episode 10.
Hmm. And it's interesting because that I think it was either before or after the run with the Tok'ra where they admit it to each other. But for sure in that particular episode, there were hints at their relationship. And then when they realize who they are, they kind of go, "Oh yeah, that's right."
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I guess the another one that we have on this list is Window of Opportunity, and that's the time loop one, and I think that was closer to the end of season 4. But for sure, O'Neill quits in one of the loops. He quits so that he can kiss Carter.
Ah, yeah, that of course. How could you forget that, right? Very true. So they're always using it kind of as a tool. like to
Yeah,
show like the two of them, you know, together because that's what like people or many people, not all, but many were rooting for. So, because I think didn't the writers say in something that like initially they wanted to have those two characters together, but then they were made aware that in real life that truly could never be possible if they were working together in that way. So like then they chose not
really,
to. I think so because of them like working in the military, and I think they were like continually like getting like that kind of advice from like real life military people or whatever. And so like I think like and I don't remember what this was that I was if it was an interview I was watching or something where it was the writers talking and they were
hmm
explaining how it must have been something on YouTube. I can't remember. It was a while ago. And they were explaining that like they had really thought about having that be a thing, but then they were told like that couldn't really be possible, like because they wanted to have it, you know, be as close to reality. I think that's why I could have misunderstood it. That's very possible.
yeah,
But that's what I took away from it is I thought that they meant that they had been getting advice from military about, you know, when there's certain rankings, you know, they just don't
yeah.
like if they were to
No,
go
that's
together, like that wouldn't be okay.
yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know that. No, I mean I didn't know that they. But I guess when you think about it, like in the first season already, they had the episode where they are infected with that like virus that sort of puts them like more like primitive in a way.
Hmm.
And in that episode, Carter hits on O'Neill when she's infected. Like she has that tank top and she
Oh,
like she hits on him very aggressively.
oh my gosh.
Yeah, but I guess I mean it's interesting because I didn't like if if you wouldn't have said that, I wouldn't have thought the writers originally would have, it almost like it's a thing that maybe they thought of. Like I always thought, oh, it's something they thought of later, like as the show went on. Maybe
Hmm.
because they did this one episode where they were together and people went, ooh. So it's interesting that they said, like that's
Yeah.
interesting that they wanted that originally.
I mean, I
So
remember
that's
that was
cool.
my takeaway from what I was listening. It's highly possible I got it
Interesting.
all backwards, but like I do
No,
remember
you're probably
thinking,
right. That's interesting.
yeah, I do remember just thinking like, oh, okay, like because for some reason I didn't expect them to say that they were thinking about that, you know, and having that in the storyline. Like I thought it was on purpose, you know, how they did it, which it was, but like, you know, maybe it could have been a case of like it was just a small thought that they had towards that and then X'd out that idea, you know, it could have been just like potentially people, um, you know, coming up with ideas and seeing how they stick kind of thing, you know, that it could be something like that. But um, yeah. Oh
I
my
mean, it's
gosh.
interesting. It's interesting because with Vala and Daniel, they didn't have, I mean, there was really nothing in the sense of a big barrier getting them together. Like, there was no protocol like that.
Yeah.
But they explored that in a very similar way, that they only lived out basically in a completely alternate timeline, their relationship.
Yeah.
Which I also think, I mean, I think it's good because, I mean, in a sense, I think it would be far less fun to watch when Vala is there if she's not bantering with Daniel. And I think once you remove that, then the banter is gone. And then so it like, it's one of those things like I think is alluded to later that Carter is dating O'Neill, but once he's off the show, like it's alluded to.
Is it really?
Yeah, there's some time I think when someone is hitting on Carter. I can't remember who, and she's like, "Oh, I'm seeing someone." And it's sort of after the situation where she breaks up with Pete and kind of realizes she wants to date
Oh
Jack.
yeah. I didn't
And
realize that that was insinuating him. Oh wow.
I mean, maybe I misinterpret. I'm just like curious. I don't know. Maybe people in the comments can tell us if this is true, if they really end up together, or I mean, it's also kind of um. But yeah, looking it up, I don't know, maybe it sounds like someone says one of the showrunners did confirm that, but I don't know how accurate this is.
It could
I
have
don't know.
potentially been, open to interpretation on purpose, like,
Yes,
um,
exactly, exactly.
which they kind of do a lot with certain things, on the show. It's like certain things are always kind of left open because then there's always the opportunity to bring it back, like in a different way or in that way or whatever. Um, so yeah, I think also, oh, that just brought back a memory of when I was watching an interview of Amanda Tapping, and I think someone asked her, like, why that never became a thing because the season that Jack ended up being on the show less,
Hmm.
Richard Dean Anderson was like had pulled away from the show to be with family, right?
Hmm.
And wanted to be in a lesser capacity. And so I think it was because of that that they never ended up having something happen because I don't know what season that was and fully what happened, but I think something had happened that they kind of indicated something would maybe happen between the two of them,
Hmm.
and then it never did. And the interviewer, I don't know if this is one of Beyond the Gate like interviews. I think that's what it's
Hmm.
called on YouTube. Yeah, I think she was saying, or maybe it was someone else, but she was saying that she thinks it never happened because he had left the show at that point. Like, and so they couldn't.
Yeah, I mean, maybe because at the end of season 8, before the Mobius episode, where I mean, they obviously do get together in that episode, but it's not really them. It's the Threads episode where also I think that's where Carter's dad passes away. Um, or no, 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 that's maybe before that. But there's something where she realizes that she needs to be with Jack, but then it's never followed up on.
Mm.
Maybe like because there's the one where like he's dating some CIA girl, and then she breaks up with him because of Carter, basically,
Oh,
because she
okay.
says something like, "Is the military the only thing keeping you two apart, or whatever?" And
That's right. That's right.
he says something like, "Well, what do you think I should do?" And she said, "Quit
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
retire or something like that."
Yeah. Yeah. And then and then that's when he started being on the show less, right?
And season 9, I think it's when he left, and yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think at least I think that's what Amanda Tapping had said was that's why she thought nothing ever happened. Like it very well could have been a storyline, if he would have stayed. But I kind of wonder what that would have been like. I don't know. Um, It's always weird with shows. Like I'm always like rooting for people, and then once they're actually together, then sometimes the storyline between the two of them just gets kind of boring. But I think the Stargate writers are so like awesome, like everyone that's written for that show, that they probably would have managed to have it probably be something entertaining. Like, it could have actually been something where like there could have been a lot of comedy with it if they were together because, that could
Totally.
be totally awkward, like switching from the friend
Hmm.
work person, like colleague
Yeah,
zone to then like
totally,
that,
totally.
like that could have been really funny. So like, yeah, there could
Yeah.
have been stuff, but
Well, the one thing I could see in Stargate specifically too is because the show is not really focused necessarily around the relationships. I mean, it's like weird because it's such a big part of the show, but that's not like the focus.
yeah.
It's always focused on the other problems, and so because the relationships themselves aren't usually a conflict in the show, or some
Hmm.
shows that is, especially like sitcoms, I could totally see where there would really be no difference other than, yeah, maybe there would be some
True.
jokes that they could execute, like that they wouldn't have used before. But yeah, it could
True.
be.
Yeah. Yeah. And in terms of like when you were mentioning earlier with Vala and Daniel, like
Hmm.
yeah, I totally agree that had they gotten together, it wouldn't have been the same because like and also too though, I do feel like the reasoning behind him kind of sometimes pushing her away anyways, like made sense because her
Yes,
character
totally.
was very fickle.
Yes,
Like, you
absolutely.
know, it's like he wasn't sure like what he could trust with her, and so it makes sense why he was very wary. And so even in that episode where they grow old together, at first he's very wary of her. And then
Hmm.
he kind of gives into it because he realizes, why not? But like, um, so yeah, it's interesting with that too. And like if we think about like any of the other ones, like there was maybe a little bit of like stuff with Teal'c and like the his wife, and then but then that, like, I think it was his wife, and then that kind of disappeared. So yeah,
Hmm.
but none of that was in like a time travel-y way, I don't think.
No, I think the only this is interesting because in relationship with the alternate realities, the only relationship that Teal'c explored in alternate reality would have been in the Changeling. So the episode where like him and Braytek are like swapping their symbiote between each other before they get the Tritonin, and they're basically near death, and he's kind of dreaming that he's a firefighter. And what's interesting is in that one, he actually doesn't see his wife. He sees Shaunach, if I remember right, the one, the high priestess who was killed by that like fake Tok'ra that was a Goa'uld pretending to be a Tok'ra.
Oh, yeah.
And so I actually thought that was interesting too, because sometimes I think in those situations they sort of expose those kind of things that maybe he saw her as more of his like life partner than his wife. And I mean, I know it wasn't really explored much, but considering she's a high priestess, I could see where she would not have been permitted to marry. And I don't know anything about Jaffa culture, but maybe there's more of a sort of familial expectation of who you marry, etc. So I mean, I don't
Yeah.
know his situation, but maybe that was like someone that he loved before and could never be with because of the her position in society, basically.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Um, with I was just looking at our list, and I was looking how like I was trying to remember what season. Okay, so you have it written down. So that was season one then. So then one of the other ones, I think they hadn't done too many of these types of episodes if we have these listed correctly with when they were played, but was 1969. Like the only
yeah.
thing I remember like from that, for some reason, like I remember really enjoying that episode. But I always just remember Teal'c's afro. Because I'm just like,
Oh
how
yeah,
did he
right?
suddenly just get an afro? Like that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, realistically that doesn't, I mean maybe it was a wig, but yeah, from a realistic standpoint it doesn't make sense. But yeah, I mean that would be one of the I think fan service time travel episodes. And I mean again, there'll always be people that will be like, oh, well, that's not realistic and blah, blah, blah. But I actually thought it was kind of cute that they ran into General Hammond and the way that like, he knew
Yeah.
to, because of Carter's hand, if I remember right. And so, I mean, I thought that was it was a cute time travel episode. And,
Yeah.
and then it allows them to later poke fun at, I think, Mitchell because I think they tell him that it's sealed, and then they kind of allude to the fact that O'Neill is his dad
Oh.
because they're like, yeah, you were born exactly 9 months after this.
I forgot about that. Oh my
Um,
gosh.
but yeah, no, I thought that was a fun one. I mean, I
Yeah.
know again people have different opinions, but I mean, it's also interesting because isn't that something they use, if I remember right, the concept of how they went back in time there, isn't that what they use in the 2010 episode? Don't they use information from that? I can't remember.
Oh.
Because in 2010, I'm just gonna look this up because I can't remember it. I'm sure there's lots of people that know, but
So 2010 episodes from season 4, episode 16. I'm not
Be
sure.
because if I remember right, it was a similar thing. Like they realized the solar flare, whatever, would do this thing to the Stargate. And in 2010, remember they have met this Shen, and the Shen are kind of in charge now of the Stargate and everything. And Carter, I think in this episode, in her alternate reality, is dating this diplomat or married to this diplomat, and they're trying to have a baby, and she can't.
Yeah.
And then she finds out from Janet that she's infertile, even though the Shen doctors have been telling her she's not. And if I remember right, they used actually the information from 1969 of how they went back in time
Hmm.
to send their note from them to SG-1, like in the past, to tell them not to visit that planet so that they
Oh,
avoid.
yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Like, what did you think of that episode in particular? Is that one that you enjoyed? Is it one that like you're unsure of? Like, how did you feel overall about
Yeah, I mean,
2010?
probably I enjoyed it. Like, I mean, I know it's like one of those things where then they erase the past, but probably I enjoyed it because I always, I always appreciate the, I mean, and like I appreciate the fact that in Stargate they have such shade towards people that don't have a sense of humor. And I remember that O'Neill, like he was basically telling them, "I told you so," blah blah blah. And one of his issues about the Shen was that they had no sense of humor.
Oh,
And
okay.
so I kind of like, in that sense, I mean, in that sense, I liked it. But I also kind of like this weird, like, time travel to the future, to the past things, where you see things that could have happened. What did you think about
I
it?
had mixed feelings about it, to be honest. I don't
Hmm.
know, something about um this is gonna sound so stupid. Something about like the vibe of the show, like something about it felt weird. Like, and I think it's supposed to feel weird, right? Because like everything's
Hmm.
different. Like, I can't remember some of the first scenes that they show, but like at first you're trying to figure out what the heck is going on because Carter's like married to some guy and talking about a baby and like they're in this other because I don't think at first they show you. I think it just kind of starts off there. So it's like it feels a bit
Exactly.
like
Yeah, exactly.
strange. So I remember feeling that strange feeling and feeling like, what is going on? Like, and I didn't like it because I didn't like that she was with that guy.
Yeah,
And
I know, right?
and it wasn't like he was terrible or anything, but I mean, well, in that episode he was terrible because of what he did, but like, or was aware of at least, I guess.
Oh, totally.
But like ultimately when she meets him in her own timeline or whatever, however you want to think of it, like he was okay. But like, um, yeah, I just didn't like it. Like it did like not that I didn't like the episode, I didn't like the vibe that I initially felt when I was watching it. It made me feel like uneasy. And so because of that, like I was just like it wasn't necessarily one of the episodes that I'm like, "Oh, yeah, that was so good." Like, I really loved it. Like, something about it gave me the ick, but I in the sense of nothing against that episode. It's more of, like, how they made me feel in that episode that then made me feel
Yeah.
like, "Oh, I don't wanna go back to that because 'cause I'm a very, like, emotional human, and so, like, when I watch things, I get so into it that, like, I pick up on all these different, like, emotions and vibes from whatever I'm watching, that's why I could sometimes easily get affected. So if it's like a really hardcore sad thing I'm watching, like then I have to take a break. Like, and so I think with this, it just felt so weird initially to me. And I didn't like how um because I really like Jack, and I didn't like how he was kind of like the outsider, and that bothered me. Like he was kind of like the outsider in the episode because like he wasn't welcoming of the Shen and everything, and didn't agree with everything, and so he was kind of like the grumpy guy in his cabin kind of thing, and like kind of how he started off, right? Like
Hmm. Hmm.
and so
Exactly.
I didn't like that, like, it made me feel sad, like, I wanted to feel like the team was back, and so,
Oh, yeah.
like, it's like I love the connection that everyone in the team has, that when you see them all separated like that, and it's just kind of like the hustle and bustle of, like, almost a weirdly normal life, yet not normal life because it's very futuristic and weird, um I think that's why I didn't like it, but I guess that also gives credit to why it's probably also a good episode because,
Yeah.
like, they
Yeah.
made me feel that way, if that makes sense. So, like, yeah, I have mixed feelings about it, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I would agree with you. Because I think the whole time you watch the beginning, at least for me, you get like, have you ever had those dreams where it's like in the future and everything's wrong? And then you wake up and go, okay, that's right. Everything is normal, or
I
something. Like
weirdly haven't had those dreams, but I know what you mean. I know how that would feel if I did. Yeah.
I have those dreams all the time. And then it's like 20 years in the future, but everything is wrong. And
Oh,
then you wake up
weird.
and everything is okay. And so to me, this is like kind of it had that like from the beginning, it had that feeling. And
Mhm.
I think because I knew it was gonna get reversed, I was okay. I was more, I think that's why it didn't like I was okay because I was like, well, of course it's gonna get reversed. Like it can't stay like this forever.
Yeah.
And but I totally know what you mean because it's extremely unsettling. And
Yeah.
then to hear it really is like like something you want to wake up from. And so
Yeah,
I
and
think
then
that's
especially
kind
how
of
it was ending too, right? Like, I think everyone was getting shot at basically, right? Like, and
mm-hmm,
I think was it Jack that like had tossed the note through like the Stargate thing or whatever? Um, and I think his blood was on the note, right?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so it's just like it's almost like a dream where it's like that it gets really depressing at the end. And you're just
Yeah,
like everyone's getting
exactly.
killed. Help, I want out.
But like none of them ever existed in the first place by the end. So it's like,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
again, it creates a weird paradox, but at the same time, you're very relieved because, yeah, I mean, and then they had the second episode that they tied in with it where they actually did meet people related to and the Shen, and luckily they got away from that. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, no, I think, I mean, it's kind of like the other one that gives you a little bit of like that uncomfortableness is in season 9, they have I think it's the road not taken. I think it's the one where, because there's one where like Carter accidentally puts herself into an alternate reality.
Mm. Yeah.
And then she ends up where like then the president, rather than sending her back, like uses her for all these events and everything. And it gives you also this uncomfortable feeling because like everybody's off in that world too. Like Landry
Yeah.
isn't like that, like but in this episode he's like that, and so it's really
Yeah.
weird.
Yeah, I hated how they had Landry like a villain in that one, where like he just became like this power obsessed jerk that would do anything regardless of the consequences and then they had Mitchell just kind of give up and not be treated
Hmm.
right and he like never fully went through with his physical therapy so then he was going around in like a wheelchair and then like all these really depressing things. I think it was kind of funny though with that one. Wasn't that the one where McKay and Carter were actually had been married but divorced or
Yes.
something like that?
Yes,
And
absolutely.
so there again is another ship of two characters that. So it's just really funny. That was amusing and like um yeah, with that one I don't know, like you're right though, it is very similar to that same kind of vibe. For
Hmm.
some reason like yeah, I think I think the thing that bothered me the most with that episode is how Landry was. Like it didn't make sense to me, regardless of it being like different decisions that can make you a different person. Like I'm just like, would he have changed to be like that? Like, I don't know. Like if I believe that he would have. Like
Yeah. I mean, it's such a hard thing because I think that's something they have evaluated in a lot of like psychological studies about how people respond to different power and different pressure. And could he have ended up behaving like that? It's probably realistic in the sense that I don't think he was doing what he was doing necessarily to be evil. I think
Mhm.
he was doing it because he felt like there was no other way. And in the situation he was in was a very different one.
Oh my
So,
gosh, yeah.
so I think it's kind of like Mitchell. Like, of course, Mitchell would never, like, he is the type of person that he would never give up.
Mhm.
But maybe in that situation, because everything was so hopeless and there wasn't even like a singular shroud of like light in the end of the tunnel, maybe in that situation, like even the most motivated person, most determined person, like can't even make it through that if there's literally no hope and like there's so I mean I think that kind of in a way that episode kind of highlights some of those things.
Yeah.
Um, that I mean, yeah, I guess there's elements of people where they are a certain way, but certain things will make you behave in a certain way because of everything surrounding you, which
Yeah.
I can see because I can see how in certain situations. I mean, they've done a lot of also like I mean, it's kind of like totally unrelated, but they have done studies of that decision making in people where they have generational poverty,
Hmm.
and they found that because it actually affects decision making, because the long-term situation it's so hopeless that it's very difficult to make long-term decisions for people
Yeah.
that have been in generational poverty. So when people say, "Oh, just do this to like get out of it," it's actually quite more difficult than that because it
Yeah.
like actually affects the decision making that if they were in a different situation, even though they're the same person, they might have been able to make different decisions. And
Yeah.
so who knows, maybe it was a similar situation with Landry if there's total chaos out there and you don't know how to handle it. I mean, or you literally can't. I mean, yeah, it's like yeah, it's one of those Stargate philosophical things that it really makes you think.
Well, that totally reminded me of the other episode too, where Daniel's all like crazy genius guy because what was it called? It was called Absolute Power, right? Absolute Power
Yep.
season 4, episode 17. And like, he gets all of that knowledge by the little boy. I never know how to pronounce like what the little boy is. Is it Harcesis?
Harcesis, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
Harcesis.
that that was a really interesting episode. I actually really
Mm-hmm.
liked that
Me
episode,
too,
but
yeah.
because it was something about it like just like well the actor Michael Shanks like I think is just so amazing at like really like playing some extreme things like within a lot of the different Stargate episodes, and so when he plays like this evil genius
He really is
basically
evil. Like
like
you really believe Daniel can be evil.
like I'm just like, oh my gosh, no, not Daniel. Like I mean, that's one too that it's like you don't want to believe that could ever happen because it's like, he seems like such an empathetic, kind character, but then he goes all wonky because he has all this knowledge that, makes him go wonky basically. But like, yeah, it just kind of reminded me of that when you're talking about all of that. I'm like, oh, what was that one with Daniel? Like,
Hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think that's one where I think it's so useful because it highlights in a way why in some ways why the Gould are how they are and how it's impossible for them to not be how they are because their memory is genetically passed down. And so it's very, you almost when O'Neill is very skeptical to trust Gould, you almost really have to believe him. But I thought, like you said, it's very interesting because he is like the most empathetic and the most sort of emotionally connected to other people, caring person. And I think it's probably those things that made him go so extreme in that episode because I think then you see everything and you care too much. It's kind of like, I mean, the most classic example of something in a similar vein is Darth Vader because it was like his love and fear of losing his partner that caused him to eventually turn to the dark side.
oh wow.
So, yeah, so I think that's like, that's like I said, like, I mean, I think that's like a kind of a sort of a silly thing, but it's like a comparison probably that
Yeah.
when he had everything, like he probably wants to help and do things so badly that when he has all this knowledge and he sees the one futility of certain things and also what you have to do in order to realize things. I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's also a very really interesting one.
Yeah. Gosh, I realized I never did actually know how Darth Vader came to be. When you were explaining that, I'm like, oh.
What do you
Like,
mean?
yeah.
How did Anakin turn into Darth Vader?
Yeah, I just never I like there's a lot of with Star Wars that I honestly don't know about just because like I think I used to watch what bits and pieces with you, but like I never really fully knew the whole story, understood it all. And never really fully got into it. So yeah, there's a lot with that whole storyline that I don't actually know. You probably know a lot more with it than I do.
Well, now I'm probably behind because there's so like I mean, there's so many new shows and animated things, and the kids have seen them all. And
Oh my gosh.
but yeah, there's a lot now. But yeah, I mean, I think that that one I love that, and I think Daniel is just so perfect as evil Daniel.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It kind of like gave me the vibe of, when what's it called? Remember in like Austin Powers, how it was there's a guy that wanted to rule the world, the bald guy, like, and he would always go with
Oh,
his pinky.
yeah, like Dr. Evil and Mr.
Yeah,
Evil or whatever.
that's
Yes.
what I thought of.
Was it Dr. Evil or Mr. Evil? I can't remember.
Maybe it was Dr. Evil?
$1 billion.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. But yeah, I mean, I think out of all of these like episodes that we just talked about, would you say any of them are your ultimate favorite, or do you kind of have like an overall just liking of all of them?
I'm trying to think like of all of them, which one do I find the most interesting? I'd probably say of those kind of episodes, I probably find Absolute Power, the one with Evil Daniel, is the most interesting, but that's like also because everything that they always did with Ascension and the kind of, I mean, it did, in a way, it shoved some certain philosophical beliefs there, but I really appreciated it, and I love that he used this to teach him, like to show him. Like, I thought that was like, because I really like using metaphors to explain things, and I like this sort of thing, and I think that this was a really, really unique way for him to show Daniel, why can't I give you all my information?
Yeah.
Why do you just have to let it go? And so I think in terms of like plot point, I would say in terms of um so when I say in terms of like something that had some kind of impact that I really like, it was that one probably.
Hmm.
In terms of cute moments, this is probably such a subtle thing. But I think because I always remember it, like it's probably my favorite, is an episode that we didn't really discuss as one of them, but it was another one of those like quantum mirror alternate reality where there's like a ton of SG teams that are
Hmm.
sent back to the Stargate at the same time. And one of them I think has like Martouf and Janet on it. And I thought that was such a cute little like bring back of a couple characters that, like seemed to have some affectionate with some of the like relationship with some of the characters because like Janet saw Daniel and then, Martouf saw Sam. And it was kind of like at the time you weren't expecting, Sam to also be interested in Martouf because you kind of at that point have forgotten about it. So it's kind of like a really cute callback to that.
Yeah. Was
And
that was after the fact of when both those characters had died, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
So I thought that was kind of for me, like in terms of the cute ones, other than because a lot of them are more overt and clear, like that was kind of just a cute little subtle one. But what
Yeah.
about you? What would you say?
I'm trying to think, like, as you were explaining, like, why yours was like your favorites and stuff. I'm just like, oh my God, I don't know. I don't know. Like, I'm like looking through like our list that we have here, and I really don't think I can pick because as soon as I go to pick one, then I'm like, but no, but I liked the other one because of this and the other because of that. So I think I'll just be an indecisive dork on this and just say that I've liked them all for the most part, that I can't really pick a favorite. Um, yeah, because I would probably be here forever, like trying to decide and then being like, oh, I like this one, but no, wait, that one had this, and so yeah, I'll just be indecisive.
Oh, were there any like fan service moments that you liked more than others?
I mean, of course, I've always liked whenever they indicate that Sam and Jack like have an interest in each other or together. Like I always think that's really cute. So probably one of the ones that, you know, had something with that. I really liked like even like the episode that we hadn't written down that we're talking about when they're in the factory thing. Like something about that episode I did actually really like because it kind of showed how those characters like really care for each other, but they didn't really like know why they remembered that. And so like can you hear me? Let's see what we were talking about. We were talking about I was talking about that I liked that one episode where like because I was mentioning how I was indecisive
Hmm.
with choosing what episode I liked, and then you says, well, were there any moments that you really liked? And so I had mentioned that I really liked uh the moment in whatever that episode is called where they are in that factory thing where they lose their memory. Is it from
Yes,
season did we
season 4.
season 4? Yeah. And what I like about that moment is just kind of like the moments between Sam and Jack where it's like you can tell they really care for each other, and it apparently obviously is such a strong emotion because they know like that they can recognize that, but they don't
Hmm.
really have a memory. And so I thought that was really
Yes.
sweet that it was like strong enough for them to kind of still have that feeling there that they know that they like each other. And then
Hmm.
but then sad because then clearly then they, you know, once they get their memories back, there's nothing they can do about it. But I
Oh
think it,
yeah.
in a weird way, it helped their characters like progress into realizing their feelings
Hmm.
more, I think. And so I think that was like things with them like that, like I thought was really cute. And so like I like stuff like that. But yeah, again, I did really like how Daniel went crazy being evil. And it's funny because like I can say that now, but I think back when we talked about that episode a while ago, I think I was saying I didn't like it because of that,
Hmm.
but it's kind of like looking back now after watching a ton of other episodes, I feel like I appreciate it more because like there's
Hmm.
just something about, you know, how he portrayed that and just like the storyline with it all that I think makes sense, and I liked it. But yeah, I can't really choose like specific favorites, but I guess there are the moments that like I like. So
Yeah. But yeah, I agree with you. I thought it was very cute, and I mean also bittersweet and beneath the surface. Like
yeah,
it's cute that they kind of like are developing something, and then the moment that it kind of dawns on them is kind of really
yeah,
like it kind of it tugs.
yeah. And you said that was called Beneath the Surface. Is that what you said? Yeah, I
Hmm.
always forget. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think
But
that
yeah.
kind of wraps up what we were talking about, right? Unless there was anything else that we haven't touched that you wanted to discuss about those types of episodes.
Yeah, I guess now would be maybe a good time to reach out and ask people, like our listeners and watchers, how they feel about alternative reality and alternate reality and time travel. And do you think it's cliche? Are there any episodes that you really love? And how do you feel about the fan service?
Yeah. Yeah. Are there any episodes you love or hate? You know, or maybe
Yes,
hate's
hate
a strong
too,
word, but you know,
but
dislike.
dislike. Yeah, we want to hear that too. We want to hear that too.